folks. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I wanted to welcome you to Return to Wild's presentation, The Animals in Our Woods and Hoods. Before we go, I'm just going to tell you real brief bits about myself. I don't have an exciting life, so I'm not going to bore you to tears here, but my name is Susan Siegel. I'm the founder of Return to Wild. I am a former critical care nurse turned wildlife rehabilitator. And in my years of dealing and caring for the human species, I've learned a lot of things. And a lot of things that I've learned are actually very transferable to wildlife care. But the one main constant that I've learned along the way is when you combine knowledge and compassion, you can change a life. And to me, that's very meaningful. Onward to wildlife rehabilitation I go. Before we start talking about some of the animals that we see in our area here, I want to share with you a little bit about wildlife care in the United States and how all of that works. So all the wild animals in our country are owned by the government. The federal government owns the migratory species, the raptors, the songbirds, the waterfowl, whatnot. And the state governments own, technically, all of the animals within their state boundaries. You may say, well, you know, who cares? But the problem is that we have with the government is they do not fund anything for the care of wildlife in our country from either the state or federal government. And that can be an issue because as a team here in Massachusetts alone, we field over 70,000 phone calls a year for issues and questions about wildlife. And when I say we, I mean wildlife rehabilitators, animal control officers, veterinarians, and Mass Wildlife, which is basically Mass Division of Fish and Wildlife. That's a lot. So there's a lot to be done to help wild animals. The vast majority of admissions to a wildlife rehabilitator are due to human involvement. For example, a possum gets hit by a car, well, that possum dies, but it has a pouch full of babies. What do you do with them? A tree falls down, and the mama squirrel runs away, and you have all these baby squirrels now. What do you do with them? Someone puts out rat poison because they have mice in their basement. And we're going to talk more about that later. And all of a sudden, that fox comes and picks up that mouse, eats it, and now the fox is dying of rodenticide poisoning. So those are the reasons typically we get a lot of animals into wildlife rehab. We are all volunteers as well. So wildlife rehabilitators, even though we're educated, we have to pass an exam, and we're permitted by the state, we are not employees of the state. We volunteer our time. This is my community service, which I love doing, and you know, that's what we do. So to care for wildlife, it is all publicly funded. And that's the way it is across the entire country. So our mission at Return to Wild. Return to Wild rescues and rehabilitates orphaned, ill, and injured animals with the major goal of returning a healthy animal back to the wild. These are not pets. We do not cuddle those cute little squirrels as much as we might want to. We want to keep them wild so we can let them go again. We are a community resource to educate the public and create the next generation and multi-generations of wildlife stewards in our community. We want people to enjoy animals and respect them and know when to intervene and know when not to. Is that not the cutest thing ever? Yes. Right? I mean, who wouldn't take that little river otter to bed with them? I would. No. Okay. Our priorities. First and foremost, when we have orphans, or suspected orphans, little babies that we see at the bottom of a tree or in the grass or whatnot, our first and foremost priority is to reunite them with mom. Our mantra is, we want to give wildlife a second chance, but never impact their best chance. And their best chance is always with their mom in nature, growing up as they should be. The second priority is to rehabilitate humanely. And what that means is we bring them in, they're comfortable, they don't have pain, they're not suffering, they have healthy food, they have medical care, they get x-rays if they need them, they're safe from predators, and they can heal to be released. One of the other key things about treating animals humanely is having the courage and the knowledge of when to euthanize an animal. Never an easy decision, but it is something that is extremely important because we have to make sure we think what is in the animal's best interest. And sometimes that is the best we can do, and that's okay. And the last thing would be to release. And our whole priority there is to release them back into their wild as a wild animal, not habituated to me, but actually in their true form, to give them that second chance. Hence, that's where that name came from, Return to Wild. Okay, so let's start. Baby bunnies, you're gonna see these coming soon to a yard near you. Eastern cottontail. So our cottontails, the most adorable things, they're a really important prey species, okay? And some people have asked me, well, why would you rehabilitate a rabbit? They're just gonna get eaten anyways. Yes, most likely many of them will. That's nature, that's our food chain. And also one of the reasons why our cottontails, the moms, each of them, remember this, have 6 to 8 litters per year from April through September. That's a lot of bunnies. And that's a good thing. They also, when they have their babies, they're typically right out in the open. They have a nest, it's probably as big as my hands and about as deep. It's only a couple inches deep. It's in your lawn. You see a little bit of brown patch, before you rake over that or mow over that, take a closer look, because that might actually be a bunny nest. Oftentimes it's covered with dry grass and a little bit of bunny fur, but you can easily miss it. The baby bunnies actually have no scent, and that is to keep predators away. And mom only comes back twice a day. She comes back in the morning, at dawn, and at dusk to feed the babies, and otherwise she is nowhere to be seen, and that's so she does not draw predators to the babies. So when we get bunnies in rehab, sometimes that's another little nest right there. Sometimes we get a whole litter because the mother maybe had gotten picked up by a cat or got hit by a car or whatnot. This is how we feed these little guys to get them, you fill their bellies and whatnot. And then when they're about the size of a tennis ball, so you can hold them in one hand, they're just about ready to be released back into the wild. And when they're in your yard, they're only there for about 3 weeks. So what we ask, actually I'm going to tell you that at the end. But before I do that, I'm going to show you one other baby or adult that has come into rehab just recently, and this guy is actually still with me. I'm going to have you listen to this. He came in with neurological symptoms. He was running in circles. He couldn't use his back end, so when he tried to run, he had what's called ataxia, so he was flipping on his side. And he had something called torticollis, which means he has a head tilt. His head was laying on its side, so that's why I'm holding up his head in this picture, but take a listen. This is a little boy, little Eastern cottontail, young guy, not a baby, but young. And he came in, animal control picked him up, and he was laying in somebody's yard. So this little guy is going to be getting fluids and antibiotics. He's very what we call neuro, meaning he's circling, imbalanced. We call it ataxic. He just flops over, and he has torticollis, which is basically a head tilt. And this can be due from a number of things, but typically it's an infection. There's no trauma to this little guy, but it's either trauma or some type of infection, whether it be a parasite like a roundworm or whatnot, or something called listeria, which is a bacteria. So there are other reasons they can become like this, but those are the typical ones. We're going to see if we can treat them and wish us luck. So he was in tough shape when he came in, and actually he came in through our animal control officer, Officer Cohen, had brought him to me, and 7 days later, about a week later, he looks so much better. His eyes are bright, his ears are perky, he looked awesome. We tried to let him go early because the thing is with rabbits, they're incredibly fragile. They get really stressed, they're prey animals, so I'm a predator, right, to them. So when I open that cage to give them their dandelion greens or whatnot, they freak out because they think I'm a predator to them. So because of that stress level, we try to get them in and get them out as quickly as we can. Sadly, when we did release him, all of his symptoms were gone, except when he started to run in circles again. So that told us that, you know what, there's still something going on up here, and we needed to bring him back in. So he's gonna stay with us another couple weeks or whatnot, and let's see if we can get rid of all those neurological symptoms. So, you find a bunny nest, what are you gonna do? That's what they look like, as I showed you before. In the middle, if they're about the size of a tennis ball or bigger, they're fine, they're independent. Leave them alone, they're out there doing their thing, and just enjoy them because they're absolutely adorable. If you see a nest, first and foremost, even if you think it's in a bad spot, do not move it. You move it 4 feet to the right, that mama may not find them, okay? And she likely won't. So just let it be. If you need to see, if you're like, oh gosh, I think, maybe that they're abandoned, there's no mom. There's a trick that you will do, and that would be you put a yarn or string or little skinny sticks in a tic-tac-toe pattern right over the nest, and you let it be for at least overnight and into the morning hours, because mom will come back at dawn and dusk, and if you go back and look at it again the next day and those strings are mushed aside, you know that mom came back to feed them, okay? If they're not, then you need to pick up the phone and say, you know what, I think these little babies might need some help, okay? The other thing that we want you to do is to protect that nest from dogs, cats, and lawnmowers, and it does make a mess if you mow them. There are a couple of things you can do. Grab a laundry basket, tip it upside down, put some bricks underneath it, and that will allow mom to come and go and feed them, but it will keep the predators away. You can even put a brick on top so the wind doesn't blow it off. Or you can tip a wheelbarrow upside down and lift the edges again with bricks. But here's the key. Don't just lift one edge, because mom needs multiple entrances and exits or she will not go. So if you just lift one edge of a laundry basket and she's not gonna go in because she knows there's no other way out. Okay, so you gotta lift up all edges of that. And they're only there for a couple of weeks, so protecting them is definitely worth it. Okay, the beautiful possum, all right? Our possums, so funny story. When I first started being a rehabber, I have to regress here for one moment, just because my dear friends, our local animal control officer, Hillary Cohen, and also our Millis Medway officer, Erin Mallett, are in the audience here. And I told them when I first became a rehabber, I'm only gonna take squirrels and bunnies. Okay, so what do you think my first phone call was? Susan, how about a possum? I'm like, bring them on over, let's give it a shot. So I became a lover of possums. And they are phenomenal, and I'm going to tell you why. When you leave here today, the one thing you have to know is you have to love opossums, okay? Because they're great to have around. So they're the only marsupial in the United States. Does anyone know what a marsupial is?
That has a pouch.
Exactly. So like a kangaroo, they have a pouch. That's where they carry their babies, and that's where the babies develop. The only one in the United States. They can have up to 13 babies in a single litter because they have 13 nipples in that pouch. They can sustain 13 babies. They have litters usually twice a year, sometimes 3 times. From April through, say, September. When the babies, after about 2 months, the babies come out and they climb onto mom's back. And when they climb onto so that's how mom carries them around, right? If you have 13 kids, you'd be putting them on your back too, I bet. And she does her thing, and she's going out to get food, and the little babies jump off and they eat the food with her. And then she says, okay, well, it's time to leave. And she starts walking, and all the babies have to run and get back on her back, because guess what? If you miss the bus, she's not coming back. The interesting thing about these guys, they're not aggressive animals at all. If you see them, if you scare them, they're gonna hiss at you, and they're gonna show their 50 teeth. Yes. The most teeth of any animal or any mammal in the United States, okay? They look really mean, and they have that rat tail, and you're like, oh, right? That's all they got. You scare them a little bit more, and they're gonna pass out right in front of you. They become catatonic. They actually fall on their side, and they call it, play possum. You've heard that term before? That's what they do, but it's involuntary, actually. They're awake, they can see, they can hear, but they don't move. And then they emit kind of a nasty little fume, and that basically tells predators, get away from me, I'm dead and I stink. These guys are actually largely immune to rabies. I mean, when I say largely, I mean 99.9% chance these guys do not carry rabies. Their metabolism is too low to harbor that virus. They also eat thousands of ticks, okay? And this is important. So, and I'm gonna tell you most of the time how this happens. Yes, they will, as they're going along, they'll rummage because they eat insects and they eat rodents and mice and snakes and all that kind of stuff. But their fur is fluffy and soft, and it's kind of like a Swiffer duster. And they go along and they're going through the grass and the trees and the leaves and all this stuff. And all those ticks love that Swiffer duster, and they cling onto them. And these guys are actually meticulous groomers. So when all but one, and I've had about 5 possum over the wintertime, adult possum, they're immaculately clean. They're impeccable groomers. So they eat all of those ticks. So they just keep collecting them and eating them and collecting them and eating them, and that's what they do, and they're awesome to have around. They're also nature's cleanup crew. So they eat carrion, that's why they're roadkill. That's why they get hit by cars a lot. Rats, mice, snakes, and bugs. And also your garbage, so keep the lid on it. Okay, in rehab. That little guy over there, that's a baby possum that was just born. And that's how they come out of the birth canal. That's what they look like, that tiny. And what mom does is she actually licks a path in her fur from the birth canal to her pouch. And the little baby crawls up the path from the birth canal to the pouch, gets in the pouch, and takes one of the nipples and they swallow it. They don't suck like other babies do when they nurse, and they stay there in that pouch for 2 months, okay, to grow further. This picture in the middle is a beautiful little litter of possums that was actually rescued by Officer Mallet here and our animal control officer, Millicent Medway. And she's also a wildlife rehabilitator. And she had these babies and brought them up and then released them back out because the mom had died. She was hit by a car. And this was my first little possum guy, and I had to bring him in. He's playing possum, okay? So we fixed up his leg from his injuries, and he was with us. He eventually got released, actually here in Norfolk, and but that's what they do. And I'm thinking, okay, I gotta make sure, can this guy walk? So one night I put up a security camera on his crate, and I'm like, I just gotta make sure, you're telling me, right, Erin, that this guy's still alive and with us? So there's no sound to this, but that was him. My husband was like, I'm so glad we have this really nice security system to watch your animals. I'm like, yes, we do. Okay. So that's him in his crate. So I had to prove to myself that he actually was still functioning. Okay. What do you do if you find one? An abandoned baby. I mean, look at that thing. How can you not love a possum, that little thing? First of all, don't pick them up in bare hands. This is a rescuer who did this, but we always wear gloves. We always wear proper PPE, so you need to do that as well. If you find one, call a rehabilitator. Remember, if they're small and little like that, that animal is not the kind that we can typically reunite, okay? Because mom's just like, she's out of here. And they wander, so that possum may not be in your yard for long. If they're hit by a car, you need to call an animal control officer. You see a dead one on the road, you're gonna start seeing them. They're gonna be around. They need to check to see if there's babies in that pouch so they can take them out and bring them into rehab. And then if they have an injury or a cat attack, you can call either a wildlife rehabilitator or an animal control officer to come and help you with that animal. Cat bites themselves are incredibly lethal to wild animals, actually to humans as well. Cats have a bacteria in their mouth called Pasteurella. It's very, very dangerous. So whether you're a human and get bitten by a cat or a wild animal, you need antibiotics right away. If you have a bird feeder, you may want to skip this page, but these little guys are awesome. And squirrels, the eastern gray squirrel, is a keystone species because these guys are responsible in a great part for planting forests, right? From acorns that they hide, they only find about 30% of them after they hide them, or they get stolen by others. They plant forests and all those acorns. All those seeds that they're taking from your bird feeder also get, planted in their output track. They also are very smart animals. They can find hidden nuts under a foot of snow. There are 4 different species of squirrel in Massachusetts. There's our little adorable gray squirrel. There are the little red ones that are kind of feisty. And then there are 2 flying squirrels, northern flying squirrel, southern flying squirrel. In our town, we typically would see more of the southern flying squirrel. They don't really fly, but they have that webbing between their front leg and back leg. So they glide, right, from branch to branch, and they look like they're flying. And when people say, oh, I think I have a squirrel in my attic, oftentimes it is a flying squirrel. And if you have one, you have probably more than that. Okay. So one thing that people have asked, they said, oh, you'll see a picture of a little bit, is this a rat? The one way to tell, I brought my handy dandy little pointer here, is their black toenails. Okay, so if you see a little naked baby like that on the ground, you know that it's not a rat if it has those black toenails. They often fall out of trees, and this was actually the first squirrel that I took care of, and this is him nursing. And this is just to show you the scale. You can pass these around. These are the things that we use to feed them. They're tiny. So that's how we have specialized formula that we use, and that's how we feed them. That's how the babies eat, out of those little tiny syringes. You find a baby, what do? That's a stuffed squirrel, just in case anyone didn't know that. So that, if you find a baby at the base of a tree, right? First thing to do, look up, see, is there a nest in the tree? It's usually a big thing of leaves that looks like it's just kind of stuffed together. Sometimes they're in the trunks of the trees. But otherwise, if that baby's on the bottom there, it didn't run there, all right? It's probably just hanging out because it fell. And what you want to do is put the baby in a basket with some soft stuff, tie it securely to a tree, or you can put it in a box on the ground right at the base of the tree. And I actually have this little thing on YouTube, and I'll share that address with you at the end. So I want you to hear this. Those are the baby squirrels calling their mother. Can you hear that? If you put that on your phone or whatnot, and you play it, and you have to leave, you put the baby in the box, you leave, you play this, that's a mama, a nice loud sound from the babies to mom. And if you put them in a box, I'm going to show you what happens. This is mama coming back to the box. Oh, there she goes. Clean them off, you okay, fix you up, right? And up the tree she takes them. Mom will come back. That's why we like to reunite, okay? That's like the perfect outcome. All right, the fox. We have two species of fox, the red and the gray. We mostly see the red around here. The gray's a bit more elusive. If you start hearing screaming in the middle of the night, a lot of people say, oh, those are the fishers. They're screaming. It's typically not the fishers. It's usually these guys either mating, or once they have babies, it's the mom and the babies calling for each other. The red fox, you can identify them. Obviously, they're usually red, but they can be browner or they can be grayer. They always have the black stockings and they have a white tip tail, which you can't really see there because of the snow, but the tip of that tail is always white. Both mom and dad raise the young, so we don't usually get or take in baby fox because if the mom got killed, the dad can come in as long as they weren't still nursing. And they usually make their dens under sheds and porches. They know that when they're closer to humans, there's going to be less predators, so that's why they like it there. The gray fox always has a black stripe down its back and down its tail and a black tip tail. Only mom raises the young for this species, and these guys actually climb trees. And they often nest in trees. They'll make dens in trees or under trees or whatnot. So these are an arboreal type of fox, which is pretty cool. When they come in, either they're babies and orphaned. This guy over here in the end, sadly, ate a rat. Someone put rat poison out, and those are prey. These guys ate the rat and brought it back to his litter, and not only did she die, but so did the babies. This guy here has mange. Sometimes we get a lot of calls, and animal control gets a lot of calls about foxes with mange. That is a naturally occurring disease. And the only time we will take in a fox with mange, which is curable, by the way, is when they're so debilitated that they can no longer survive in the wild. Two reasons. One, it's a naturally occurring disease, so Fish and Game don't want us to interfere too much with that. But number two, when a wild animal gets sick or injured, they do their darndest not to show it, right? Because they don't want to be prey. They don't want to be easy prey. By the time you're able to hand capture, and I'll tell you why we have to hand capture, to hand capture a wild animal, they're kind of sick, really sick, and pretty close to not being with us. It is illegal in Massachusetts to trap, using a physical trap, outside any wild animal. It's illegal for me, it's illegal for animal control, unless it's a rabid animal and they're like right there or whatnot. It's illegal for the public. You cannot trap any wild animal unless you have a very specific permit because you're a hunter of some kind. So by the time you can get a pole net or a blanket or whatever over a species like this, they're really sick. But we will take them when they get to that point, and and oftentimes they come right back after being treated for a couple of months actually. The beloved raccoon, adorable. This is the primary rabies vector species in Massachusetts, okay? Just because you see them out during the day does not mean they are rabid. They are nocturnal species, but they are often out searching for food during the daytime. These guys carry something called raccoon roundworm, and that's actually a bigger concern, and one thing about not handling, and you don't want to feed raccoons. If you have raccoons in your yard, that's fine. They come and go, they're out and about, but if you feed them and they hang out there, in their feces is something called raccoon roundworm. It does not hurt the raccoon, but it comes out in their poop. And when they're in one place for a long time, that poop is there and that roundworm is there. It is zoonotic, meaning it can be transmitted to humans, and it's also transmissible to other animals. That rabbit that I showed you that still had all those neurosymptoms, our suspicion is he has a raccoon roundworm in his brain. Okay, so parasite is actually transmissible to all those other animals, and if you have your grandkids coming over, you have dogs outside, you don't want that stuff there. Okay, so don't feed the raccoons and do not touch them. If you see babies or whatnot, if you're suspicious that they're abandoned or whatnot, call animal control, call myself. And in our town, between the two of us, you can call either of us, because if you called me and I'm like, you know what, that's a Hillary question, I'm gonna have you call Hillary, and if not, she'll say, nope, that's a Susan question, I'm gonna send you to Susan. So we'll work back and forth like that. Anything of concern, if you think an animal is rabid, you call animal control, you call the police, and they get in touch with Hillary, Officer Cohen, right away, okay? And don't touch them. Those, absolutely.
I have a lot of bird feeders, which I take in every night, but I have raccoons every single night on my cameras.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
Are they, is that dangerous having them around like that?
No, you know, they're gonna wander through and they're gonna come up and look around. That's what they do, they live amongst us, right? But when you start to feed, then you get droves, you know, and they come back and they're hanging out there for 20 minutes.
What does their poop look like?
What does their poop look like? Big bunny poop? Like big?
It's more canine-like, I'd say.
I would say
smaller.
like a pug-sized, but more cylindrical than formed like a canine would be.
Got it.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Susan, are the roundworms visible?
They are not. So, and actually it's the roundworm eggs. And that's the part, they're very difficult to kill. So the eggs of that parasite come out in the stool. They can actually stay in the environment for up to 10 years. They're very difficult to kill. And that is actually one reason. So at Return to Wild, at our facility, we do not rehabilitate raccoons. There's a number of people in the state who do, and I would send them to whoever would do that. But that is because I don't have the space. They need their own specific caging. You can only kill the parasite, the egg, with a blowtorch or with boiling water, submerging a cage. So it's, and then you have to use that cage, laws say, only for raccoons. So it takes a lot. They have to be away from other animals and whatnot. So it's just a lot. But they're adorable. I mean, you know, who wouldn't want like one of those little guys? There are a couple things here, some things you should know. And I have one little slide for each of these things. Rodenticide, it kills the entire food chain. Rabies is 100% fatal for animals and humans. Native habitat, I'm going to talk a bit about that. We need more of it. And who to call? Animal control or a rehabilitator? So it's one thing I want you to remember. You guys maybe have seen the recent thing in the news about the eagle in Arlington that ate the mouse or the rat and died of rodenticide poisoning. These are the unintended victims. One thing, and this is not pointing the finger, I would say the vast majority of people never even thought, I have mice in my basement, I'm just gonna kill them. Okay, I mean, that's fine, but do not use poison, because that mouse or rat that's in your basement or around your house eats that poison, and they're in and out of your house for the next 2 days. And guess who's gonna eat them? The eagle, the hawk, the owls, the fox, the coyotes. They're gonna eat that, and then they're gonna die of rodenticide poisoning. So most people wouldn't even think, oh gosh, okay, that makes total sense, but never would have thought of it. It goes right up the food chain. And that's not an issue just here, all over the country, and it's a big deal. It's in legislature, we have bills we're trying to pass, both federally and at the state level, to ban these rodenticides out there. But they're at every hardware store, they're legal to sell, they're legal to use, but they're deadly. Years ago, remember, decades ago, DDT, right? Our eagles became endangered. We're doing all this stuff with this chemical, doing the same thing with rodenticide, and it stinks. Okay, and they die of, it's a anticoagulant, so they die of hemorrhage. This squirrels came in bleeding at the mouth, and that's what happens. Hawk, same thing, ate the mouse or whatever. That weasel came to me, that was picked up in an industrial parking lot in Walpole. A gentleman brought it to me. They were like, oh my God, this guy, he's always in our warehouse. He's, and around the industrial park, going in and out of warehouses, catching mice. He's great, we love him. I think he got hit by a car. They came in one morning, he was out in the parking lot. One of the warehouses had rat poison out. He ate the rat and he passed away, and same with the fox. So it's really a sad thing. It goes right up the food chain. Feel free to spread that word. We're doing our best to try and do that. Rabies vectors, primary rabies vectors in Massachusetts. Around the country, it's the bat is the primary. And bats you don't want to touch, and we can, if anyone has questions about them, if you have one of those in your house, you need to call animal control ASAP. Raccoon is the primary rabies vector in Massachusetts. then the bat, then the skunk, then that adorable fox. But remember, every mammal technically can carry rabies. So just be aware, okay? Rabies, again, is transmissible between animals and humans, and it is 100% fatal. I want to just give you, just to kind of make things clear about this, because I think that it's important for people to know, and not to blow rabies out of proportion, because it's very rare for humans to get it in the United States. But I want to give you a couple of stats. So worldwide, annually, there are about 60,000 human cases of rabies, okay, all of which are fatal. The vast majority are in Asia, Africa, and India. All right, that's where most of them come. There's only between 0 and 4 annually in the United States, because we do a pretty good job of controlling rabies in our country. All right. However, between 2009 and 2018, so basically a decade, there were 25 human cases in the United States of rabies. The primary vector was people who were bitten by bats. The second one was people who were bitten by raccoons. And the third one was people who were bitten by dogs, but not dogs in the US. They were bitten by a dog on their trip to India or Brazil or Asia. Okay, so nothing has been transmitted otherwise about that. In 2019, and that's what this slide is, there were 131 positive cases of rabies in animals, okay, in 1 year in Massachusetts. That's only, and the positivity rate is only 5%. All right, so if my math is correct, that's about 2,600. Okay, math isn't my subject, but I'm pretty sure. So animals that were sent in to be tested was about 2,600, and there 131 of them came back as positive. Raccoons were the top one at 55, followed by bats at 34, then skunks, then foxes. The smaller ones here, those were questionable. The rodents, lagomorphs are rabbits. Rabbits rarely have bunnies, and if they do, they're the ones like jackrabbits that are out in the Southwest, okay, Pacific Southwest. All right.
Susan, a question?
Yes, sir.
Several times you said they're all fatal. Does that mean every human being who gets rabies dies?
That is 100% correct, yes. It is 100% fatal. It's, so, not everyone who's been exposed to rabies, because if you were exposed to rabies, you, me, whomever, right? Oh gosh, I accidentally picked up that baby raccoon, and that mom was licking the baby, so the saliva, which is how it's transmitted, right. You would go and we would immediately have you sent to your doctor, and you would get rabies vaccinations. Right. So we can stop it. Yeah. A lot of times what happens in the people, because I've just done a lot of research in my knowledge of this, is most people say, oh, I didn't really realize that it was so prevalent. Well, by the time you have symptoms, sadly, people, they're dead within a month. It's pretty bad. So it's something that, and that's why we're so careful. That's why our animal control officers always have rabies clinics for people's dogs and whatnot, because we want to keep it out of the human population, okay? It's also deadly for the animals as well. Okay, so just a quick thing about this. This book, and I have it back there, if you want to take a look at it, Nature's Best Hope. I had the privilege of seeing this gentleman, Doug Talamy, speak at a recent National Wildlife Conference. And he's a professor down at the University of Delaware, and his whole, all of his research is based on the ecology in our environment in the United States, especially in the East Coast, which is where he was from. And it talks about the vast majority of homes in our country have invasive species as plants in their landscapes, right? Myself included, sadly. The Bradford pears, with the white flowers, so pretty. Most of our flowers are not native. And what happens is those plants do not harbor enough insects, enough caterpillars, enough bugs. They don't provide enough cover for birds to make nests, or acorns or nuts for our wildlife to eat. That is a problem. And his research shows that if people within the United States took a portion of their yard, up to half of their yard, and said, you know what, we're going to cut that out, we're going to make it pretty, but we're going to plant native species, oak trees, specific types of flowers. I'm not going to be able to think of it off the top of my head, but it was amazing that if we do that, that we will have more native habitat in the United States than every single wildlife natural reserve in the entire country combined. okay? That's what we need. It's a great book. I'm going to see if the library will start to carry it, but it's really something because most people think that these guys are pests, but the little bugs, we need them. You know, we really need them. Who to call? Did you not know you were in this presentation? Officer Cohen, you are. Look at that picture. That was the bunny she brought me right there. Okay, that's myself. I rescued a hawk about a month or so ago in Norton. I'm going to tell you, this is your Norfolk animal team. The difference. Officer Cohen, she's part of law enforcement. So she's employed by the police department, and they enforce all the animal-related laws, whether it's for domestic animals and the care of them and whatnot, or wild animals. Okay, so if an animal has rabies or if an animal is causing a public safety issue, that's what they handle, okay? Wildlife rehabilitators, we're volunteers, we are permitted and regulated by the Division of Fish and Wildlife, and we have laws that we have to follow in handling wildlife and educating the public and whatnot. That is what we do. They focus on mostly domestic, but also wild animals, and their focus is public safety. Our focus is wild animals only, with the only purpose of to send these animals back out into the wild. Animal control officers do a lot with educating the community. Wildlife rehabilitators also do a lot of educating the community. Animal control officer, she loves animals and her local wildlife rehabilitator, and the wildlife rehabilitator in our town loves animals and their local animal control officer, okay? So I point that out, it's not always the case, in any other towns, and also we're lucky enough that Officer Mallet here from Millicent Medway, we work together, we call each other, we really collaborate, and that's what we want, right? I mean, we're all in this for the same reason, is to help animals and keep people safe. You, our community, what can you do to help? First of all, when in doubt, if you think an animal's in trouble or you want to know what's the best thing to do for them, give us a call. Give Hillary a call. Call the police. They have my number as well, and we'll figure out, you know, how to work on that issue together. Is it a problem? Does it need the animal has to, you know, be taken out of the public for whatever reason or out of the forest or whatnot? We'll work on it together. If you find a baby animal, first thing, remember, Mom, reunite. That is the #1 priority. There's no kidnapping allowed. Never use rodenticide. You have rats or mice around your property? Put up an owl nesting box. Free rodent control.
Excuse me.
Yes,
Can
ma'am.
I have a lot of bird houses. And
Yes.
I have a couple of bluebird houses
Oh,
that
yeah.
are active.
Awesome.
Is that okay to have an owl fox too?
Good question. So, some raptors do eat small birds, 100%. It is okay, the owl nesting box doesn't have to be, you know, staring down into your family room or whatever. It can be sort of out in a tree around, and that is totally fine. They are nighttime hunters also, owls, and so the songbirds and whatnot are back asleep by that time when they start to come out. The owls are really after the rodents.
Because I've noticed on my Blink cameras that he's usually at night sitting, he or she is sitting on the bluebird house.
The raccoon or the owl?
The owl.
Oh, yeah. Yes, but that just might be a good perch for them.
Okay.
You know, yeah. Owls don't typically stick their face or whatever, or try to get into a birdhouse to get a baby.
Anyway.
Right. A hawk, on the other hand, all bets are off. Okay. Where are we? Oh, plant native habitat. The mighty oak. An actual oak tree, right? They're around. They're native to New England. This tree supports 90% of the caterpillars and insects with the leaf cover, with the acorns, with everything for our wildlife. The best tree to plant if you want to plant new trees in your property, okay? And they're beautiful. And how you can help if you're in a position and you want to support care for wild animals. Yes, Return to Wild is a charity. We are a 501c3. We welcome donations. We also can use any items that maybe you are cleaning out, right? We all like to have that cleansed feeling of cleaning out a closet. Old fleece blankets or fabric, pillowcases, flatbed sheets, washcloths, unused medical supplies, needles, syringes, pee pads, IV fluids. And if you're out walking around or hiking, pine cones, acorns, hickory nuts, fresh clover, All those are great because that's what we use to feed our wildlife as they transition to the wild.
Good question, Susan.
Yes, sir.
So, with the owl boxes, if we were to put up more owl boxes, would it bring more owls to the area, or is it just kind of limited to the ones that are here?
So they definitely have a territory. It won't just be limited to the ones that are here. The more opportunities we have to support nature's rodent control, the better. Now, in Norfolk, we don't have a town-wide rodent problem. There are some towns that do. North Attleboro, huge issue, huge issue. In the cities, huge issue. But it will bring in more species, on 100%, as will that oak tree.
Would owl boxes work in a town like North Attleboro?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if you do have mice or rats or whatever come into your basement, I get it. No one wants them in their house, 100%, okay? The old-fashioned snap trap, as much as we hate them, that's a humane rodent control. It just takes them out immediately. I know no one likes to do that, and I'm not saying we should all kill them all. My point is, it's better than poison, 100%, okay? These guys these are animals that are in Norfolk. We have a bear, typically. I don't even know if it's one. Hillary might know. Actually, I think she has it in her backyard. And we have at least a bobcat, if not more. Yeah, we have river otters, coyotes, possum, all these guys, fawns. They live in our community, okay? It takes all of us to care for them. We're so lucky. We're so lucky in this town. We have so much forest cover that we have all of this wildlife. So we have a pretty good ecosystem in our town. But it takes us as a village together to care for them. And with that, I will leave you. And I really appreciate you being here. And I thank you for caring about our local wildlife. So. Hillary.
I was thinking about this through your presentation, and then I saw the fawn at the end.
Yeah.
Do you want to just discuss about what happens with fawn behavior and mom,
Sure.
so that people don't panic when they see Bambi in their yard unattended for hours upon hours?
Absolutely, and feel free to interject as I share some of this. So we have a lot of deer in our town, right? Wonderful, until they hit your car. So, but when they have babies, they can have one, they can have three, okay? Those babies, they leave them in the grass, usually on the edge of woods or whatnot, by themselves 90% of the time, okay? That fawn, just like the bunnies, has no scent to attract predators. That mom leaves that fawn in that grass all day, and oftentimes all night. They come back twice a day to feed that baby. Why? Because when they're there feeding the baby, predators know that mom's there, and now the predators know that baby's there, okay? It is so important that people don't kidnap fawns. We all know they're adorable. Who wouldn't want to go scoop them up and say, oh, we got to protect this little guy, whatever? Totally get it. They're amazing, but we can't do it. We have to make sure, first thing, if mom's around, unless there's a female doe that just got hit right there in front of your house and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm pretty sure that's the mom, okay, that's when you need to call animal control or myself, and we'll coordinate and take care of the fawn. Unless that happens, you got to leave the fawn alone. If that mom has multiple fawns, in the first, I believe it's the first month, could be more, you can correct me if I'm wrong, she will not have them lay down by themselves together. She will put one here, and she will put the other one a couple hundred yards away. And if she has a third, again, a couple hundred yards away. Save the species. If a predator sees this one, fine, but it's not going to get all of them. That she will not have them lay down by themselves together. But they will lay there, and they will be there all day. If you see a fawn, and it has flies flying around it, it's yelling and yelling for its mom, that's when you need to call for help and say, you know what, something's not right. If it looks like it's laying on its side like this versus all curled up, all cute, then we have a problem. Then we know that mom hasn't come back to feed that baby in a while. And that's when you need to call for help. So, and Officer Cohen, what else do you have to share about that? And because I know there's a lot of, car accidents, right, with deers and whatnot. And what happens when that happens?
So under mass laws for the wildlife pertaining to deer, There is no rehabilitation for the species unless granted with a special permit, which is, I've been the ACO for more than 25 years. We have not received a permit for any rehabilitation for deer. So in the situation when they are struck by a motor vehicle, if they are still on scene, then we do the next humane option for them. If they get up and can ambulate, you know, that they have a chance of survival with a good quality of life, we allow them to be. We do have quite a few deer in Norfolk that are challenged. They don't have use of all of their limbs, but they can ambulate, and people call in limping deer, and I do try to explain to them that, you know, the same philosophy for us is just because that animal has some difficulties or special circumstances and you see those reflected in their ambulation, it's not usually a lights out situation for them. And I try to compare it with us. I limp a lot too, so I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't want that type of drastic measure. If they have good quality of life, their flesh is in good coat, and you know, you have evidence that they're eating, they're drinking, that they can have a quality of life. So we tend to be conservative with deer. Obviously, if it's on scene in a traumatic injury, you know, animal control and the police department will handle that right then and there. One of the reasons why deer is not rehabilitated is because they imprint so easily, just like horses, donkeys, goats, sheep. And the law is very clear that if a wild animal cannot return to the wild due to habituation, that we have to call it quits right there.
Yeah. And that's the sad part. So if someone picks up that fawn, they now are so habituated and imprinted on humans. So first of all, they're a hunted species. No one wants the deer walking up to the hunter and be like, hey, you got any, you know, acorns? So you have that issue. And number two, they can become a nuisance to others. And they imprint, like she said, incredibly quickly. There are 2 rehabilitators in Massachusetts that have a permit from the state to rehabilitate fawns. So say, you know, there's a mom and gets hit by a car and they have to dispatch the mom or whatever. Well, now we see, oh my gosh, she's got like 2 baby fawns. What do we do? I mean, that's terrible, right? You don't want to take them out, and they can't really survive on their own if they're too young. Those fawns, we can take them to one of those rehabilitators. One is way out in the Berkshires. I actually went out and visited her. She has an amazing setup. She's definitely in God's country. I had no idea I was still in Massachusetts. She is, the setup is interesting. So when they feed the fawns, right, they immediately put them in that. They do not allow pictures. Like you can't, they'll hold things in front of their face when they get the fawn. Like that's how bad, like hoods over their head, because they don't want them to see the human face, okay? They take the fawns and they put them in a pen, which is huge, and then they have a small little station with a board up and holes in it, and they can stick the bottles of milk, of the fawn milk, through the hole so the babies can feed. No human contact at all. And then they won't get habituated, they won't imprint on a human, and then they can be released. But as you can see, if, you know, everybody was doing it, you know, people, their emotions take over, and they want to, you know, cuddle them, and they're wild animals, and we're doing more harm than good by doing that, so.
I throw corn out in the morning. Is that okay? I mean, because sometimes I think the deer are there at night eating leftovers. That's all right?
Yeah, you know what? Can you not tape this part? No, just kidding. You're fine. You ask a wildlife biologist, they're going to say, you know what, don't feed wild animals, whatever, and put out stuff like that.
I would keep the squirrels out. The squirrels like better than the bird feeds.
Right, no, 100%. And you know, we've all done that, and I feed birds and all of that kind of stuff myself. I would say, you know, try and keep it as close to the woods as you can, you know, and, you know, that's okay. As long as we're not like, you know, putting out these nice big bait stations of, you know, rotten apples and piles of corn and stuff like that. But you want them to be able to, they can come, you can see them, they're beautiful, I get it. We want people to enjoy them. We just don't want them to come up and start eating out of your hand and you know, asking for your leftover spaghetti.
I have another thing, I'm sorry for all this.
No, this is great. I love it.
I have sort of a seasonal stream that goes through our yard, so we have
Nice.
a lot of fish or cat.
Yeah.
It's lovely, but the other day I saw a deer with horns for the first time.
Yeah, the males?
There was a male and a female.
Mhm.
And the funny thing is, the male looked very interested in me, and the female kept stopping, like she was trying to control him not to come near me, but he was bigger than her.
It's like normal life.
Very interesting. I cannot quite say what's going on in that relationship. Erin, do you have anything else to add to that kind of deer behavior? You may have experienced that more than myself.
I've never seen that. I mean, it's not during like
Running
season or
that's
anything like that. The
just-
only thing I can think about is if it was possibly the mother, and that
It
was,
could have been, but.
and that
she
was
bigger than her.
a buck from her. So this is the time of year where they'll be saying bye to their kids from last year as the does get ready to give birth, and so they'll stay with them for up to a year, and then when they have their new babies, it's time to, usually the females will either take off or they will kind of stay around. So unless she felt that maybe he was
Getting too close to me.
getting too close, she could have been kind of saying, you know, hey, you know, the thing about whitetails is they do have that white tail, and you'll see it go up as a warning, so that would be a good sign for you to look to see if she was giving warning, like raising her tail. But I do want to, if you don't mind, Susan, I do want to jump in on the feeding of the deer. So deers are ruminants, almost like a cow, you know, they chew their cud. It is normal to see them laying down during the day. Some people call and say, like, I have a deer laying down in my yard, like, is it okay? But you want to be careful with anything you feed them because their digestive tract changes from spring to winter time. So you may think you're helping them, you know, with snow on the ground and them not being able to get grass, whatever, but their digestive system changes so that they can eat twigs and things like that. So by feeding corn or
Yeah, I wasn't trying to
apples.
feed them.
No, I'm
I
not
just
saying, I'm
noticed
just
that they were
saying,
coming.
some people do, and I'm not saying you, I'm
Yeah.
just saying some people think, you
I
know,
can
they're
stop.
being,
It is a good idea
they're
to
being
stop.
kind, no, because they will come, unfortunately, you know, they will come and they find bird feeders and they find people's corn
Okay.
from feeders and stuff like that. Like, just like Susan said, you know, it's not good to be putting out bait stations, which is illegal anyways, but, you know, so just be wary of that. You know, people a lot of times think they're helping, but in fact, they're doing more harm than good.
I have a question, or actually a comment. I think as far as rodenticides go, I think certain pest control companies are the worst culprit. I had one come to my house because we had a big rodent problem upstairs in the attic. And he was all about putting out poison all over the house. And I wouldn't have thought twice about it, except my sister said, you'll kill all the animals outside, and I had no idea about it.
Right, and I think you're the majority. I mean, I think the majority of people feel that, and until you're like, oh, wait a minute, I guess so. Yeah, that's why we're trying to spread the word, the education of that.
And that is the pushback in legislation right now, is those big companies that utilize this method of extermination.
And yes, and the other thing is too, if you do need an exterminator, you know, ask them what alternative methods they use other than poisons, because there are other methods. The other issue is with commercial rodent control companies, they use a second generation rodenticide, okay, which is probably 5 times as potent as the initial rodenticide that you can find at the hardware store. Meaning, instead of that eagle having to eat 3 rats to get enough in their system to kill them, they only have to eat 1 and they die. So the poison strength that companies use is over the top. It's unfortunate, but it is true.
Do you want to talk about sticky traps? Why
Yes.
those are not good?
You know those glue traps that people have and they're like, oh, well, you can just trap the mouse and you go down and they're kind of like going like this, you know, in the trap? No glue traps. You know what the problem with glue traps is? Other animals get on the glue traps. We have so many animals that come into rehabilitation covered in this sticky, cementy glue that we have to try and get off of them because the squirrel will run over it, the bunnies will run over it, the fox will run over it, and they get covered in this stuff and they can die from it because they get, they'll starve just kind of sitting on that glue trap. So glue traps are not the answer. Other than the owl nest box, a snap trap, the old-fashioned snap traps with the cheese, like you used to see on the Tom and Jerry show, that is a humane trap, okay? The other thing is they have now, I feel like I want to buy one and experiment. I don't have any mice in my basement. My husband will kill me if I bring one in just to try this, but there's a bucket top that it's like a little trap, and the rodent can go up the top, and it's like a flip top, and they get to the top and they fall into the big bucket or whatnot. You know, that is another thing that people can try and use, and then they're able to take them outside. And actually the most effective is using crumpled up tin foil or just plain steel wool and shoving it into every crack you possibly can between your, you know, in any of the holes in your basement, or the holes in where the heating pipes go through, water pipes come into the house, between the foundation and your siding. Those are all places that animals can get into your basement. Go ahead, Al. Sorry, 1 second.
I have one of those, you're welcome to try it.
Oh, did it work?
It does, and it's so funny because it's like a ladder, so flat
Yeah,
steps
okay.
with a flip top. My question is, when you use that and you've caught 1 or 2 mice, what do you do with them?
Okay, so you can release them back outside. Drowning is not humane and against the law. So I do know that when some people have used this, I would say take them out in the woods, let them go, and just cover, you know, close up your basement. You put them in Reynolds yard, absolutely, absolutely. I know people who have said, well, if I have any, you know, rodenticide, can I use it in that bucket? Okay? The answer is you can, except, because they will die in that bucket, okay? It's not humane in my eyes because of what it does, but it will kill them, but then you have to dispose of those mice wrapped up really well in garbage bags in your trash and get rid of them, because what happens is even if those dead mice go to a landfill, they're going to get eaten by something. Something's going to find them. So yes, do people do it? Yes. I would suggest not. Take them and let them go.
There's another trap that is about like that big, and it's the top slides off, and it's got like an entryway, and then they can't get back. And I use that all the time, and I catch constantly. And I just take it outside, open it, and they run away.
Oh, so they're still alive when they go in there?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I was interested as to whether you are getting bitten is any frequent kind of occurrence, or if you have a fear of that, rabies aside, and also whether you might happen to use a pest control firm, because I'm curious to go straight home and call them and ask them when I complain about mice, what are you using?
Interesting. So first question, yes, so we are trained in safely handling animals with proper protective equipment, from bite gloves or whatnot, depending on what the species is. Myself, I'm certain my animal control officer associates, we all have been pre-vaccinated with the rabies vaccine, which is a couple of shots. And so we have that also. And then, but if we get bitten by a rabies vector, a bat, a raccoon, a bear, we don't do bears, but whatever, those kind of animals, a cow, believe it or not, things like that, we will actually have to go and get a couple more shots right away to prevent us from getting rabies as well. So is it a concern? Always. You always have to have that protection and keep yourself safe when you handle wild animals. And there's other diseases you can get from them. So there's a lot of things, and why people say don't handle wild animals if you don't know what you're doing, because you can get diseases from them. So that's your answer to question number 1. And number 2 was, no, I do not have a rodent control company that I would recommend. And it's interesting because a couple of the colleagues that I have were trying to figure out if anyone's used one that we feel would trust enough to say, yeah, they actually go about it the right way. There's a couple of great ones that help you like get bats out of your attic or squirrels, and they put in like this one-way door, so if they come in and then they go out, they can't get back in, things like that. But yeah, we always, if we find one, trust me, we would recommend them.
Yeah,
So
I have one. It's more, the initial reason was for the kind of abundance of carpenter ants, but every once in a blue moon, there might be a mouse issue, and I want to phone them and find out what they're using now that you described this. Chipmunks are quite the fan of our garage, actually, and they'll come in at a little opening inside and little.
yeah, absolutely. And that's the other thing. If you have, seed, dog food, and trash, anything that's in your garage needs to be really in a very sealed container.
I'm sorry. We were away for a week, and I had bird feed. inside a plastic container with towels and blankets all wrapped up in it. Red squirrel came in, ate through the garage door. And then not only that, and then ate through the blanket and the bin. Ate a hole out in the other garage door. Instead of using the same hole, he made another hole.
They find it, trust me, they're Dickens, absolutely. It's not easy. It's not easy when you live in the country like we do.
I have a question that maybe edges into what you and Hillary do, but isn't really part of it. I watched a show about, they call them keystone species and stuff on Channel 2. And the whole idea, and it ties back to why bugs and butterflies are important. All the species of plants and animals are important. Every time they disappear, it puts us at risk.
Absolutely.
Faster and faster.
Absolutely.
Do you guys ever get involved with local or regional ecologists who are trying to reinstitute a species because, and they're using some sort of a predator, because if those predators aren't preying on the next level down, that next level down grows out, they eat out all the plants or whatever, and next thing you know, you have a whole barren environment. Do you get involved with that at all?
So it's really interesting that you asked that. That whole native species thing is a big thing for me, just personally. It is not something that I think wildlife rehabilitators, perhaps as a whole, but there's certainly individual interest that, I want to be, if I find an ecologist nearby, I would love to, and I'm sure animal control, my cohorts here, would be so interested in just either learning more about it and helping to spread the word and helping to keep our ecology balanced. And it would help everybody, and 100% helps us. So yes, I would do that. Am I doing it now? No. I'm still trying to learn how to take care of all the species that my animal control officer sent to me. So yes. Yes, ma'am.
Phil, you can check with the Garden Club of Norfolk and Stony Brook.
The garden club, yeah.
They're in a native species.
Yep. And I was talking to the Garden Club and Stony Brook, so we're all kind of connected, and just trying to connect all the people who are in, want nature to be nature and want wild animals to be wild animals, and how to protect them and how to live with them and coexist, and they're just so important. And I mean, I think most of us, I would assume most of us who are in this room, love them, love seeing them, love that we live amongst them, love all of that stuff. And that's a great thing. And being a wildlife steward and an ecology steward is phenomenal. So.
Okay, one more.
You're great. You have good questions.
When do we call you? Like for what? Like, for example, the other day I had a cardinal, looked like a young blonde male, and it was flying, but not well. And it kept it was that really cold night, it was just sort of sitting in the middle of our yard, so I brought it into the garage, put it in a box. It still died, but is that the kind of thing that we call you for, or is it larger animals?
No, you can call me for anything, whether it be a little bird or a downed hawk. It doesn't matter. Anything big that I can't take, or there are certain animals that I can't take. So right now I have a state license. I can take pretty much most mammals, reptiles, and some birds, but I cannot take songbirds, and I cannot take raptors. So yes, did I rescue a hawk? Yes. If you had a songbird that needed help, I could stabilize it or whatnot, and easily. Yes, it is. So it's a migratory species, so you need a federal license for that. That will take me probably another year or two to get a federal license. However, if you called me, I would say, you know what? I'm going to send you, here are 3 people that I know who take songbirds, and give them your contact information. The other thing is, too, there's about 150 active rehabilitators in Massachusetts. If you went on mass.gov/wildlife rehab, you will come up with a page on the Mass Wildlife website, and it will show you a map of all the wildlife rehabilitators in Massachusetts and what animals they take. So that's another resource if you can't get to us. Remember, we're all volunteers for the most part. There's some who have different situations, but we have a network of people who can take those. And we just kind of help you navigate that if you needed it.
Yeah, so I'm interested to hear about where you come down on, there's been a tremendous state initiative to go solar and to get, single family homes to get solar panel. What the companies right away want you to do, if you're eligible for it, is take your trees down, take foliage, and you've got plenty. I refuse to do it.
Yeah, we're having a backyard project done, and they wanted me to take down all these trees, and I'm like, no. So, yes, so that whole bit about the whole tree thing and whatever, I agree, and not taking down anything you don't have to for safety, absolutely. I mean, I get it. People want to make their yards, we all do it, we have to do it. Don't do it in the spring. Don't do it when there are nests in the trees and baby squirrels up there and all the rest of it. That is a big thing, and we save them whenever we can, but that is out of the scope, really, of my knowledge or expertise in any way.
And sometimes you might not want to take down, but you take down that one tree, but you plant 6 or 7 more.
And maybe oftentimes they're ornamentals and they don't belong here. That's the problem.
Plant the right ones.
They're fine, they're allowed.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you again, Susan, and thank you to everyone for coming.
Yeah.
This has been a fascinating discussion.
Well, my pleasure, and thank you very much. And also,